Derby County are maximising Carlton Morris again, and it's come with the change of system, and ultimately that is one of the main reasons why he picked up a hat-trick in their most recent game up against Stoke City. Now obviously for Derby County, it's been a rough start to the Championship campaign, but things are starting to turn a corner, with Derby County winning 3 on the spin. Now Derby County could make it 4 on Tuesday night up against Hull City, and could that see Carlton Morris picking up another goal in his already illustrious campaign? Now obviously there's still a lot of time to go for Derby County in this Championship season. Can they get themselves onto the back of a playoff push? You can let me know your thoughts on that down in the comments. But should we get into talking all about Carlton Morris? Now, Carlton Morris for me has been one of Derby County's best players this season by absolute far. And the thing is, many people are going to look at a signing like Carlton Morris and go, it was a bit of a risk. Obviously it's paid off, but it was a risk. And ultimately, I actually believe that the risk on the signing of Carlton Morris was very, very low. I think we all knew the quality that he had and what he was capable of doing. And ultimately, John Eustace has maximised that. I think so far this season, I think he's already matched his goal tally from last year. And we're only in November, which is absolutely ridiculous. Now, obviously, there's still a lot of development to do for Carlton Morris in this Derby County side, and obviously working around the pieces around him. But ultimately, I think John Eustace has found that spot. Now, let me know your thoughts on that down below. Now, obviously, in the most recent game, Carlton Morris picked up a hat-trick, which was an absolutely tremendous hat-trick for me. Obviously, header from a corner, whipped in by Joe Ward. The second goal, which was a brilliant through ball by Sidey Peck. It was a great ball. And he obviously delivered. That's what Carlton Morris does. He delivers in those moments. And it was a very, very good finish from Carlton Morris at a point where you look at what strikers could potentially do in that situation. They overthink it. They get in their own head because they've got so much time and space. But Carlton Morris was excellent in his delivery of that goal. And I think I'm not going to turn around and say that Sheffield United were very good yesterday, because I don't necessarily believe they were. But ultimately, I think Derby County have really found a performance level over the course of the last couple of weeks. And it comes with the reintroduction of Sondre Langas. It comes with the introduction of Bobby Clark into midfield. I think Derby County have really taken a step forward. And I think until that changes, we've got to keep with this setup. For me, I know some people will be talking about Diaz, who's been playing on the right-hand side behind Carlton Morris. Some people may say that it should be Brewster, it should be Caden Jackson, so on and so forth. But ultimately, for me, I think that Derby County on the whole, since reverting to this 3-4-3, having Carlton Morris as the focal point, I think we've looked so much better. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to say Carlton Morris doesn't have his downsides. Obviously, he's not necessarily the quickest bloke in the world, but he's very good at using his body. He's very, very good at getting on the ball. And I think we have to talk about that in regards to him, because for me, he has been absolutely phenomenal for Derby County this season so far. And for no want of a better word, I think he's been by far our best player of the season as it stands, and is pushing himself for potentially a Player of the Year campaign in his first season at Derby County, which I think is absolutely amazing. Now, when you look at the turn of form for Carlton Morris, you look at his dip, which, don't get me wrong, I don't even think he was bad in those games, but you look at his dip in form, and that came with him being moved out of position in order to sort of suit Patrick Agyemang. And I think ultimately we had that the wrong way round completely. I think it should have been Agyemang that was sort of slotted in behind Morris, in not necessarily as a number 10, but ultimately as that player behind, because I think when you see Carlton Morris as the focal point, he is an absolute baller. Like, that is not even a joke. He is, like, arguably, I think you could argue, one of the best strikers in the division. And I know some people will sort of go, but is he one of the best strikers in the division? Is he really that good? And the thing is, for me, I do believe he's up there. I think in terms of goals so far this season, I think he's only one behind Brandon Thomas Asante, if I am correct. You can obviously correct me on that down in the comments. But I think it's one of those where you give him the opportunity to put himself in those positions and he will take the chances. You look at Stoke City on the opening day. We had, maybe 2 chances that game. Only one of them fell to Carlton Morris, if I remember correctly. And what does he do? He puts it in the back of the net. You go, then the next 3 games after that, I think he scored 4 games in a row. And then it came to the point where Derby County started to try and integrate started to sort of integrate the system with like Ryan Brewster and Bobby Clark behind him and things like that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to say that we performed badly in all of those games, but obviously in some of them we did. But it was one of those where once they started being integrated, and then you bring in Patrick Adjumang and change it to like a 4-2-4 type setup, it just didn't really work for Carlton Morris, in my opinion. And I think now that we've reverted to Carlton Morris as a number 9, we look so much better. I think if you go back to the Norwich game in the second half, that was when everything changed for Derby County. And in my personal opinion, that came from putting Carlton Morris in that sort of number 9 position again and moving Adjumang over to the left, which is where he's been since then. And I think it's been absolutely phenomenal. Now, we obviously made that change at half-time, bringing in Sondre Langas for Ryan Brewster, which put Morris back up as the 9, Adjumang on the left, Diaz on the right. And the change from first half to second half, like, was ridiculous. The amount of opportunities we created, the quality of opportunities we created. And I do think a lot of that stems from having Carlton Morris as that number 9. And I think you can't really underestimate the influence that he has on a back line, in my opinion, because him just sort of standing on the last man drops them deeper, because ultimately they know the ball's either going to come into him or they need to be ready for a cross sort of thing. And that's, for me, what like Patrick Adjumang doesn't quite have in the Championship yet. He doesn't have that fear factor, if that makes sense. Everyone knows what Carlton Morris can do. He's played in the Championship, League One, the Premier League, and done it at all levels. And don't get me wrong, I know last year some people are going to turn around and say didn't have a great year last year, and he didn't. But ultimately none of the Luton squad did. And I think we can see now with Carlton Morris on Derby County's books just how good of a striker he is. And I think I've said it time and time again, Carlton Morris is one of those players that you hate to play against, but you'd love to have him. And I think he sort of just fits that narrative of being an absolute bastard to opposition defenders. And that is what you sort of need to deal with. And that is what you need in the Championship. You need players that are going to cause problems. You need players that are going to have a huge impact on the opposition defence and causing problems for them, which opens up opportunities for the forward line, for the midfield as well. Because I think you can't also underestimate the introduction of Bobby Clark into the midfield too, because for me, I think that really opens doors for interplay between Morris, Adjumang, whoever's on the right, Diaz, Brewster, Jackson, Bobby Clark, getting David Ozo involved as well. I don't think you can underestimate those sort of influences. Now, obviously, there's always going to be some huge discussions around this and about whether Carlton Morris is playing in his correct position, whether certain decisions are being handled correctly at Derby County. And obviously, if you go back just a couple of weeks ago, I was definitely on the fence about our current situation. But as I've always said, football is a results business. You get results, there is no pressure. You don't get results, the pressure begins to mount. And I genuinely feel as if Norwich City has been a turning point for Derby County. And that Norwich City game for me, had Derby County gone on to lose, I think the toxicity would have been absolutely unbearable. Now, thankfully, that did not happen. Carlton Morris has stood up again and put the ball in the back of the net. You can let me know your thoughts on Carlton Morris down in the comments. If you have not done so already, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and on the notification bell, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye, guys.